What's going on, Summoners? My name is Dan, and I'm here to bring you back another mid-patch update. Yep, we're back once again for patch 10.18 because it was a pretty big one. Our analysts have been actively looking at statistics and keeping track of Summoner's Rift to give you guys the most up-to-date and accurate information to help you win your games. We'll be following up on our 5-tier list that we provided at the beginning of the patch and let you know if any placements have changed. Also, any trends you might need to know about will be covered in this video as well. I do want to mention before we start, though, that you should definitely give ProGuides.com a look if you're trying to improve before the season ends. We've introduced VOD reviews, so if you want to save time and improve by having one of our coaches look over a replay for you, you know where to go. For our question of the day, is there a universal buff or nerf you'd like to see in League of Legends? For example, I remember that a while back we actually had every champion gain some extra base movement speed, while Boots of Speed lost some of its bonus. This made them less impactful, and I think the change was a pretty healthy one overall. If there are any major changes you guys want to see in the game, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear them. With that all said, let's get into the video. Beginning with the top lane, let's give you guys that rundown by following up on all the changes that went down this patch. First off, Set's changes have actually been pretty successful. His win rate has remained around the same, with the biggest drops being in elite levels of play. From around Iron to Gold, his win rates actually went up as a result of this patch. Any higher, however, and he's seen small drops in his win rate. It seems that he'll take a hit in competitive play, but remain a relevant solo queue pick, just like Riot intended with the nerfs he received this patch. Thus, we're okay keeping him in the B tier for now. Shen was moved down from the OP tier to the S tier, and the drop in his performance accurately represents this change. Overall, his win rate has dropped by a little bit more than 0.5%, but Shen's overall win rate falls just short of 52% still. He's a bit less oppressive than before, but still proves to be a significant challenge to many other top lane champions. Thus, we're also happy with his current placement in the S tier. The biggest question of all for this patch in the top lane was Kayle. Hands down, she probably brought out the most questions among the community, and we're here with the facts, nothing else. Before we go on, I want you to be honest with yourself. Did you think the changes this patch were a nerf or a buff? Riot stated that the changes were an overall buff for her, but a lot of players, including our analysts, weren't really too sure about that. Nonetheless, maybe we ought to trust Riot every now and then because Kayle's overall win rate actually increased by about a whole % this patch. While her Q no longer refunds a part of its mana cost and her W's mana cost was increased, her E now costs no mana and also travels quicker than before. Overall, this minor change has actually led to more players finding success on Kayle. The only elo where this isn't the case is in Diamond and higher, where her win rates have dropped a bit. This is probably due to the fact that she's more exploitable in losing matchups than before. However, most players are on the Rift ready to fight, and Kayle is definitely a stronger duelist than before. Finally, Rumble received a small buff to his Q's damage output. Increasing his Q's damage by 5 at level 1 and 25 by level 5 has actually increased his overall win rate by about a whole %. However, this still means that he's underperforming slightly. We've gone ahead and made a readjustment to Rumble's placement and moved him back down to the B tier from the A tier. With that said, we don't have any other changes to our top lane tier list that we need to cover. Our OP pick for this patch is still Darius, and following him in the S tier are Fiora, Garen, Jax, Urgot, Singed, Maokai, Camille, and Shen. We stand behind all of these S tier picks. While some of these champions excel more in different brackets, they all hold very high win rates in both low and high elo. With the exception of Garen in high elo, there's no doubt they're all very optimal picks for trying to climb. Specifically, Urgot and Garen are great picks for gold and below, while Camille and Fiora stand out a cut above the rest in high elo games. With that covered, let's hop into the jungle next. In the jungle, we had two very similar balance changes. Xin Zhao and Jarvan got some damage buffs to their W and Q respectively. We're making a slight adjustment after assessing the data. Xin Zhao will keep his spot in the A tier, but Jarvan is still underperforming a little bit. He's not bad, so we'll only move him down to the B tier, but it doesn't feel like he's the strongest pick either. Jarvan remains outclassed by many other junglers because he still struggles to win his duels against a lot of meta junglers. The issue for him is that when he fights, he commits hard to it. He'll throw down his flag and then jump towards it, expending his primary abilities. There's no getting out, at least not until his abilities come back up. So if he's not going to win that fight, he ends up in a sticky situation every single time. With the balance changes covered, let's talk about other changes we've made. We dropped Hecarim out of the OP tier recently, but have decided to place him back in. While he did receive a slight revert on the massive buff he received, he's still finding incredible amounts of success, and his ban rates have been on the rise. Hecarim is fighting for his spot as one of the most contested junglers in the game right now, especially in high elo. At the same time, he still dominates low elo and stands out a cut above the rest. We've also, to what we believe will be to many of our viewers' surprise, placed Rammus as our other OP pick for this patch. Now, hear me out. Rammus currently holds a 53% win rate overall. Yes, this is absolutely absurd, and he remains a decent pick up until Master Tier. I know that the best of the best might not think highly of Rammus, but the reality of the matter is that what they think might not be right for you. Rammus dominates low elo, and if you're looking for easy wins, why not just go for it? What's contributed to his success, as well as the success of many other tank junglers, is how weak Trundle is right now. Trundle has fallen out significantly, and thus, tank junglers get a big pass. Our OP picks in the jungle are Hecarim and Rammus, while the S tier consists of Evelynn, Kha'Zix, Karthus, Fiddlesticks, Nunu, Rek'Sai, Vi, Elise, Kayn, and Graves. If you're in gold or below, you can also add Shyvana and Warwick to the S tier list. That covers the jungle, so let's hop on over to the mid lane next. Moving forward with the mid lane balance changes, let's talk about Galio first. Galio lost some damage on his Q, and our analyst did a good job moving him down from the S to the A tier beforehand. His win rate has dropped a little bit more than 0.5% as a result of the small loss of damage on his Q. To reiterate why this is the case, he's obviously lost damage, but he's also lost some wave clear. By clearing waves faster, mid laners have an easier time roaming to side lanes and making plays to influence the game. Strong wave clear for Galio in particular also means that he'll be able to cast his ultimate and assist his allies with much less to lose. It's the opposite in this case, however, since he did lose some damage on his main damaging ability. Ahri surprisingly got weaker this patch. While Riot did a good job of pushing Kayle forward and making her stronger, Ahri's changes have unfortunately left her a little weaker this time around. Thus, we've moved Ahri down to the B tier, but for you guys who enjoy playing her, don't fret. Riot is well aware of what's transpired and plan on giving her some small buffs very soon to help her find her footing once again. In terms of other changes, we have many new faces in the B tier. We moved Zoe, Orianna, and Victor down to the B tier this time around. With the development of the meta, it's clear that players favor picking up aggressive AD champions as well as assassins. It's a struggle to survive the laning phases these types of champions, and a lot of the time, you even get outscaled as them. These guys are still decent picks, but it often doesn't feel as good as picking influential characters that can dominate the early game as well as the mid to late game. We've also introduced Lucian into the B tier because he's seen a huge surge in play as a mid laner. He's hit it off with around a 49% win rate in the mid lane, which isn't bad by any means. He's a champion that requires a decent amount of skill to play, so it's totally fine if his win rate sits slightly on the lower side. For the mid lane, our OP pick remains as Yone, while the S tier consists of Fizz, Vladimir, Zed, Talon, Kassadin, Katarina, Echo, Diana, Sylas, Annie, Karthus, Nocturne, and Yasuo. That's it for the mid lane. Let's head on over to the bottom lane next. For the bottom lane, let's run you guys through some updates on those changes. First, Ashe did receive a small nerf to her base attack damage. Alongside the nerf she received on patch 10.16, this change has led to Ashe being a bit weaker than before. While Ashe is still a powerful solo queue champion, it's worth noting that she falls a bit below a 51% win rate right now. Still, the immense amount of utility she provides is hard to pass up, and our analysts still consider her an S tier pick, just not worthy of the OP tier anymore. Kog'Maw's defensive stats were nerfed a bit this patch, and as a result, his win rate has dropped by almost 2%. We'll let him remain in the B tier for now, but it's definitely pretty rough for Kog'Maw as he's more vulnerable than before. He lacks defensive tools, so when he gets caught out, all that's left for him to do is fight. Unfortunately, as he's a bit squishier now, it's easier to lose those same fights. Unsurprisingly, Miss Fortune's buffs bumped her back into the S tier, and our analysts are adamant about keeping her there now. For those of you who are curious, her win rate increased by a little more than 1.5%. Just gaining back 5 movement speed on her strut and a little bit more attack speed has led to a drastic change for her. Finally, Twitch received a pretty sizable buff, but he's still not cutting it. We moved him back down to the B tier for now. His win rate increased by about 0.5% this patch, which really isn't much. We think the reason for this is that the current meta is dominated by so many lane bullies. Picks like Lucian and Miss Fortune have made their return, while Caitlyn and Ashe are veterans from several patches ago. Overall, it's really hard to scale up and hit those late game power spikes when games are so often decided very early on. On that same notion, we've also moved Kai'Sa down to the A tier because she's also struggling to scale up when there are so many lane bullies present in the bottom lane right now. Aside from this, we've made one change to the tier list by moving Caitlyn up to the OP tier. While her win rates did drop a bit following a nerf in patch 10.17, her ban rates have been on the surge. She easily makes it over the 50% ban rate mark, and that's a pretty big milestone. If a champion is getting banned every other game, that says a lot about them. There's player frustration, and many times it's due to the fact that the champion is way too difficult to play against. Following Caitlyn up, we do have Ashe, Jhin, Draven, Ezreal, the Lux and Sona duo, and Misfortune in the S tier. Finally, let's wrap things up with supports. Like we mentioned in our initial patch rundown, there weren't any support changes this patch. Thus, we don't really have anything to follow up on and can move on to show you guys the tier list. We've been analyzing data, including support win rates, play rates, and ban rates, leading us to make the following changes to our tier list. First off, we've gone ahead and bumped Lux up to the S tier once again. In both high elo and low elo, she's carrying games pretty consistently. She received nerfs previously that made us want to move her down a tier, but it's clear that those same nerfs weren't enough to keep her down. Lux is currently the most popular support in the game right now, and for good reason. Her utility is pretty impressive. She's able to provide an insane shield for her allies, lock down foes with her Q, and also slow enemies down significantly with her E. In cases where she randomly gets fed, she can accidentally build some AP and just become an AP carry for her team as well. You know, the good old 25 stacks Magi Soul Stealer, Rabadon's Death Cap kind of accident where their mouse slips and they end up purchasing some needlessly large rods. Thresh has been moved down to the A tier as well. The meta seems to favor enchanters a lot more than before, and Thresh's low base stats make it a bit harder for him to really apply the kind of pressure he'd like to during the laning phase. Unlike other aggressive supports like Blitzcrank and Leona, he also doesn't deal as much damage, so it's harder to get that snowball going with him. We've also introduced Pantheon support to the A tier. He's become a dominant pick in high elo solo queue, but we found that he's a bit weaker in lower elo, where players don't fully take advantage of his ability to roam and turret dive. Wrapping up the supports, we've got Lulu, Blitzcrank, Senna, Soraka, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Leona, Alistar, and Lux occupying our S tier. That's it for our patch 10.18 mid-patch update. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure to leave any feedback you guys have in the comments below. Like always, I want you guys to check out ProGuides.com if you're interested in improving your gameplay with our abundance of resources. Until next time though, best of luck on Summoner's Rift, and I hope to see you all in our next video.